with the Gates Foundation, and of course with the SDG Council represented here, and all of you with your presentation, your time, your dedication. And let me share with you, I'm being introduced as the climate champion, which is something that is expiring in less than 10 days from now. I'll continue supporting the work through my functions as Special Envoy of the Secretary General on financing the 2030 agenda, and supporting as well the work going forward through some initiatives that we are doing, especially in Africa, through GFANs. Having said that, and listening carefully to the excellent comments of the panelists, I'd like to share with you issues of concern and possible ways forward. And I'm happy that there is a focus not in 2030, but in COP30. And we need really to have this kind of urgency in our action. And I've seen that with great deal of value in some of the matters that had seen some positive developments during the last 18 months. When you have a shorter timeline for action, and when you have dedicated teams with decent accountability frameworks, you can really deliver. We have seen that in the case of the Loss and Damage Fund that was created last year, but it is operationalized now with the decision that was a surprise decision in the first hours of the COP, while everybody was waiting for that to happen, as it is normally the case in the last hours of the COP. But I like just, all of us are very short in time, 2 dichotomies, 3 reports, and 3 funds. And you touched them in different ways. And as always, I'm very grateful, given that there was another report that I'm not going to mention, which is the SDG Council report, thanks to the leadership with a subgroup of this council led by Susanna Gabel and her team that provided this report, lots of updates on it, and great deal of background that we are still using and I hope not abusing. But the 2 dichotomies, and I hope that Indermit was still with us. The first one that I confronted when I started the job as a climate champion is this false dichotomy between the SDGs and climate action. And that has a great deal of bureaucracy, politics, and exaggeration of the differences of approaches. And it has something to do with the political economy dynamics, because the agenda of climate action has been hijacked by some certain countries and groups. But now, especially with COP30 as well coming, with what we try to do in Egypt, and now the attempts building on that here in COP28, I think issues related not just to mainstreaming, but bringing the SDG 13 back to where it belongs. This is climate action, and this is SDG 17. And this is not new. I remember when we were working on the post-2015 agenda that became the SDGs, there was really a rejection from political perspective, from technical issues as well, that will keep that in its own track, UNFCCC, otherwise you will destroy the whole post-2015 agenda. Perhaps Gagi could remember those discussions that we started when I was at the World Bank, and she was frequently coming in different capacity then to the institution, talking about finance and how that could really be more impactful. But at the time, naive, at least on my side, it's basically climate action should be part of the SDGs. If you do better in energy, it's SDG 7. If you are doing better in the spelled out Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda, it's all about water management, food system, as you were just mentioning earlier, Susan. So that, I think, is at least from developing economies and emerging markets, and some common sense prevailing in the OECD, some of the OECD countries, that there should be no tension between SDGs and climate action. And that is not just about getting people happy together, that has impact on finance, in policy design, on prioritization of budgets. If we're not getting that right, we are going to be always complaining about gaps and overlaps as well of efforts. The second dichotomy, it's basically the unnecessary tension between the global public goods and the country platforms engagement. For 2 years, including in my former employer, at the World Bank, I mean, there have been unnecessary waste of time about that. Yes, there are global public bads, there are global public goods. In order to tackle them, you need to have action, not just at the national level in countries, but at localities, at communities, at municipalities. And again, that was a great deal of waste of time, but now we are seeing this kind of connection. I'm happy that we have 1,000 mayors attending here, heads of state, and we have global leaders, regional leaders, national leaders. The 4 levels of governance are here convened in Dubai. And that will take us to the government summit in February, and we'll be talking more about that, linking the 4 levels together in our action. And there is, as you know, there is other councils working with us. On the 3 reports, yes, I think it was mentioned in different ways. The Vera Songwe Nextern report, I think Endermit summarized it nicely. The $2.4 trillion of gaps and the generous assumption that the heavy lifting is going to be coming primarily from domestic resource mobilization. Good luck with countries suffering from debt service, because you go to talk to the Minister of Finance, you say, well, DRM, good luck. He would really say it could be disaster risk management, not domestic resource mobilization, just to escape from the discussion. Or who would say, well, domestic resource mobilization could mean private sector at the domestic level to be mobilized, which is assumed, and then getting the whole resources mobilized beyond finance, which is being assumed. But we are suffering from a great deal of general assumption that may get the lack of implementation in some cases and not necessarily so otherwise. And the other report I'd like to mention is the Singh Summers report, and that was mentioned as well, especially here in another dichotomy, which is basically about what we're expecting from the MDBs. We need more efficient MDBs and we need bigger MDBs. We need to squeeze the lemon to the limit, but we need more lemons, because actually, as I've been telling many of our colleagues, many of the MDBs are losing relevance in many countries because of the size of capital that is constraining them from doing more, not just more in funding, more in knowledge, more in partnership, more in de-risking. In my home country, when I was in government, my ceiling was around $2.4 to $3 billion a year. Today, Minister Rania, who's handling this matter, is constrained by almost half of this figure. In a GDP that is almost 45%, even after devaluation, higher than what we were. Here is the relevance of the institution. That needs really to be fixed. And given that every one of you sent a message to President Lula, I would say, well, make it a priority to reach a political decision to provide the capital increase necessary. And President Lula, through your many friends, I'm going to see one of his advisors today, being part of the last capital increase of the bank, of the World Bank. It took 3 years of preparation from 2012 to 2015. Decision was made in Lima. It was implemented after that in 3 years. And until this moment, there is some contribution that are not fully subscribed to and delivered. So here is the story. We're talking, if we are going to wait for some good understanding of the CAF or the capital adequacy framework until it's materialized, we're talking roughly 2030 until we see the new capital. This will be constraining IBRD. IDA has its own way, but IFC that would really love to have more capital at hand. And then the very, very final report is basically something that comes from OECD, and perhaps through your many friends in OECD countries, because a typical OECD country called Paris, France, Paris, hosting the OECD. And there was a commissioned report by President Macron, led by 2 top economists, Tirole and Blanchard, put 3 priorities as challenges of France. Climate change. The second was inequality, which was mentioned in different ways. And the third one is demographic challenges. If I translate that without having those great minds, they mobilize through their networks, tens of experts with them, come to Egypt, come to a typical African country. Climate action, yes, we are needed, but we don't have the resources, the means of implementation, the technology, and the efficiency that you need really to have. So we need lots of that in order to support the work, including the incentives. So lots of collaboration is required. Second, that we need to push fast in dealing with inequality. But surprise, surprise, our countries in Africa suffer from something dangerous that you mentioned different ways, extreme poverty, that in some countries since COVID until now had doubled. And when it comes to the demographics, while France is suffering from aging, our country has aging issues, but it has as well the youth bulge. So if you have three problems, multiply them by two and come to the real world of developing economies and emerging markets in the way that they need to do more with less. And nothing can really solve that without really decent solutions with international cooperation. And we have seen great examples of that. Loss and damage has been created, a fantastic initiative by the UAE in establishing a 30 billion fund with ambitions to reach 250 billion. This is not going to fill the gaps that you mentioned about, but at least one country did that on its own. Yeah, let's see something bigger perhaps with other countries around the world. And definitely we need the ambitions enhanced by actions in the field, and it's good to get as much as we can people from the real world to correct our parts while we are trying to do our best. Thank you so much.